This is the 10-Minute Contrarian Podcast. This is VP. We are a solutions-based podcast, diving into the world of contrarian investing and alternative finance. You can find us hosted on the No Nonsense Forex YouTube channel, NoNonsenseForex.com, and podcast players everywhere. Episode 159 is brought to us by Bybit. I think I'm batting close to 1,000 on this. Every time I come on here and do a Bybit read and tell you that the market is slow, now would be a really good time to get in before the market moves a lot. People take action, sign up, get used to the site, and then usually catch a really nice move like we just had. And this wasn't some crazy reversal. Price was already going down, so most people had the chance to get in here. Again, not a great time for crypto investors, but a really great time for crypto traders. Imagine a market where the good times are good and the bad times are also good. You can have both, and do that with Bybit by going down and clicking the link to the Bybit blog in the description. Read it. At the very bottom of that blog, you click my affiliate link and get yourself signed up. Not only will you be able to take advantage of everything that's going on, you get all the benefits that comes with it, because with Bybit, membership has its rewards. It is the 10-Minute Contrarian Podcast, and I'm going to tell you right now, this is the episode I probably dread doing the most, because this is just stuff I don't talk about, and for good reason. But before we get into it, as you probably saw if you read the description of this episode, it is not a crypto episode, even though the title might suggest that. We saw a very precipitous drop these last couple days in the crypto market, but we've already talked about it. We talked about it last week. And we know exactly what to do, don't we? By now. I mean, we might have gotten caught off guard years ago, but we know exactly what we need to be doing now. We need to ask ourselves, is this a rational drop? What is the catalyst here? I just saw an article on Kitco, believe it or not, to where they said this is the largest drop since the FTX fiasco. Now, can anybody tell me what, right now, at any level of magnitude of FTX is going on right now in the market? You can't, because it doesn't exist. And can anybody name any bearish case? There's a couple floating around right now, but there's always a couple, no matter what the market's doing. One of them is Mt. Gox. Thankfully, people who are invested in Mt. Gox and got their Bitcoin taken away are finally getting it back 10 years later. And the thought is that people are going to get those Bitcoin and sell them. I don't know. Some people might. But to me, if I had put something away for 10 years and it got the returns that Bitcoin did, I would tend to want to keep most of those. I might sell a couple just to put that money elsewhere, or to buy a home or a car or something like that. Sure. But again, that's a pretty short-term bearish case. Now, the other bearish case is that Germany is selling their Bitcoin. I'm not sure if they're selling all of it, but a reasonable amount of it. And this has actually been known for the majority of the week. And we here on the podcast already know that financially, at least, Germany is not in great shape. They're probably going to have to sell off a lot more than that. In 2023... a lot of sovereign nations out there bought a lot of gold. Germany didn't. Well, that was stupid, VP. Why didn't they? I don't know if they could. Right now, Germany are sellers, not buyers. And I think it's going to be this way for a long time. So it's really not much of anything that was driving this market downward, but you guys also know how this market works and how leveraged it still is. Less leveraged than it was before, but still leveraged. So when you get these moves down, they trigger algorithms, they trigger stops, and this has a cascading effect, which takes us to where we are right now. But again, it's all irrelevant because you guys know exactly what to do, or what at least we at the podcast here recommend. So moving on to what could be, depending on how you look at it, the shitty part of the podcast, which is going to be all the rest of it. But we need to talk here, and I think we need to talk right now, because the news cycle is fairly slow, and we know that for the rest of the year, with the American election, it is going to really, really ramp up. So it's better to have this conversation now while emotions and feelings and passion is relatively low. Up until this move down in the crypto market, we've seen very, almost record low trading volumes. The stock market's not moving a whole lot. Metals aren't moving a whole lot. So I think right now would be a good time to get this particular strategy. And in my opinion, it's a very important strategy, or I wouldn't even be talking about it to begin with. But I think it is really important to get this particular strategy in order. So I am currently in Latin America, in a country I've never been to before, and I am meeting a lot of expats and people who are considering moving here. And where I'm at right now doesn't get a lot of people who are moving for like a hippie lifestyle or drugs or booze or prostitutes or anything like that. And then on the other side, you don't have a lot of retirees. So those two groups of people, as far as expats go, I can't really jive with, but the people who are here are like my people. You know, they understand the need for a second residency. They have their shit together. They're looking for opportunity. And so as much as I've hoped to get out and meet more locals, you kind of take what you can get early on, and what I've gotten has been really, really great. I've gotten to know a lot of these people. And the vast majority of people out here are the same as the vast majority of my podcast listeners, and they lean heavily, in American political parlance, lean to the right. And oh boy, you will see varying degrees of that right leaning. In particular, these people who I've met for the first time in the past 7 days. Some of them are way right, and it's been interesting having conversations with them. Because boy, do they love talking about the problems, but when I ask what they're doing about it, you know, they are coming to Latin America to get another residency, which is good. That's more than most of y'all are doing. But when it comes to all the other things, financially and everything else we talk about here on the show, they're way behind you guys. So heavy on problems, generally light on solutions. You know, I've met a few Bitcoin maxis out here who are American, who want to renounce their citizenship in the United States, which I think is absolutely absurd. I don't know if I've ever talked about that on this podcast. Maybe I will someday. But now's not the time. You know, I know people who have one bank account and no crypto. And one guy I talked to did have a lot of physical gold, but couldn't get it into the country and wanted to know what he could do. And I was able to help him out. A lot of people were really excited to hear about the last blog post I did over a week ago on opening a remote bank account. I gave you 4 possible countries to where you could start the process right now of having another bank account without having to travel to it. Because banking in most of Latin America is an okay option. I mean, barring maybe like Venezuela and Cuba, but it's most banks here, apart from a couple places, aren't terribly strong. So it's been great. I've really felt like I've been able to help a lot of my people out, just like I try to do every week on the show. But what I've noticed with a lot of these very, rational-minded and people who have made money and are taking chances, the focus on the problem really does seem to take away from a lot of things. In particular, the overall solution. Like I said, a lot of these guys were just really light on solutions. And if half the stuff they were talking about actually came to fruition, they would be just as screwed as somebody who didn't see it coming at all. So I wonder, given what I know about my audience, how many of you are susceptible to falling into this trap as well? How many of you would be much better served completely distancing yourself away from a lot of these things that you already feel quite passionate about? I mean, that's no easy task. But whether the task is easy or hard, to me, it doesn't matter. My job is to present solutions to you, and then you get to decide if you want to implement it or tell me to go take a walk. So here we go, as I take a deep breath and get into the part that I don't want to get into. Okay, I'm going to throw my opinions out there on something. This is the opinions of one man, and if you disagree with it, or even if you agree with it, I don't care. It doesn't matter. And you'll hopefully understand why more towards the end of the podcast episode. I mean, got the links I will go to and the things I will say and waste your time with just to avoid that 2 or 3% of you who just can't handle it and must respond and set VP straight. I'm telling you, if you do that shit in the comments section, my response to you is going to be the same every time. So what? What do you plan on doing about it? Because this is the only thing that matters. But VP, the election doesn't matter. They're just going to rig it anyway. Okay, so they are. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to be upset about it for the next 10 years? Are you going to let the terrorist win? Or are you going to use things like this to motivate you into setting your life up to where over time, things like this won't even really make a difference? in your life or probably your family's life either. So, okay, moving on. Does anybody ever wonder where identity politics came from? It really started to come to fruition in the 2010s, and it's not a new construct. It's been around, but they really stepped on the gas pedal hard and heavy in the 2010s. I subscribe to a theory, and I've looked into this enough to where it's not completely confirmed, but it's damn near close. If you guys remember in the United States in 2011, Occupy Wall Street, it was a movement. Not to where, like, you didn't really see anybody, like, threaten to go over the wall and take out these bankers, but it was close enough to where a lot of them, and remember how powerful these people are at the top, too. Maybe not the people who were working on the fifth floor of these buildings who were watching the protests, but the people at the very top. They all talk, they all run things. They got together and said, okay, we need to keep people from ever coming over the wall because, one, it wouldn't take the biggest effort in the world. It's actually pretty easy if they wanted to do it. And two, we just need to distract them. It works every time. They're dumb. And they were like, well, what's worked really well before? Well, the obvious ones, really, racism and gender equality. People lap that shit up on both sides of the aisle. And so they brought it back. Like I said, really hit the gas pedal on it. And true to form, you guys have been eating that shit up for the last 13 years. And this is true for both sides of the political aisle. So while everybody's yelling and screaming over this, the bankers are in the background, going about their business unimpeded and unthreatened. But then when it comes to each side of the political aisle individually, there is a tactic I want to talk about. And I've known of this tactic for a while, and I see it everywhere. And it's like a slow car crash. You can't do anything about it because, again, my platform is not big enough. So screw it. I'm going to share it with you guys, and I want you going forward to maybe make a little game out of this. See if you can recognize when this happens, because it happens all the time. This has happened ever since the dawn of media. I call it the zoom in tactic, to where the media will take something the size and significance of a coin and then blow it up to the size of a football field in order to make you think that these problems are more significant than they actually are. Now, to a rational thinking adult, this tactic should not work that often. But not only does it work often, it works almost every time. Now, why is this? Because the majority of people, especially people who are passionate about political things and current events, they typically feel before they think. And look, that's not their fault. If you're that way, then you're that way. But just know you are very susceptible. You are prey to the people who run the world and run the media. And the people on the right might think this is more of something that happens to people on the left, because one of the stereotypes people on the left have is they get really emotional and really hysterical over a lot of things, when, truth be told, this tactic works just as well with people on the political right too. Because for so many people, it's not about getting the right answer, because that just doesn't serve them. It would actually serve the greater populace, and then over time it would serve you, but that's not how people look at things. They already feel something. And whether that's a good feeling or a bad feeling, that's what they want to feel. They want to feel that thing. It makes them feel alive. It gives them identity, whatever the case is, right? So, for example, this might not be the best example, but it's relevant because we just talked about it. Let's say I am a Twitter account that is bearish crypto. I just don't like it. I think it's all going to zero. I'm one of those people. I might come out with a tweet that says, Bitcoin drops 8% over the past 7 days on the heels of German selling. One of the most financially prudent nations in all of the world is dumping their Bitcoin. And then I put a period at the end of that sentence, and I hit send. Now, nothing I said was untrue. Not one lie was told. But if you were also a crypto bear and you didn't like crypto, you would see something like that and you would really like it. It would make you feel good. And at this point, it's not really worth doing any more research. Hey, you got what you wanted, and now you're going to go tell your friends. When I just explained what's actually going on, why it happened, and why I think it's probably a good buying opportunity, because every time something like this has happened before where you see a drop, but it's not really fundamentally driven, it's almost always been a really good buying opportunity. Now, of course, I'm a crypto and Bitcoin bull. So the best thing I can do is explain my position and then also show you that history is very much on our side. But maybe a more relevant example, because these examples are definitely going to hit you in the feels probably somewhere, but instances where I feel, and again, this is just me talking, where they really took something that was, so first of all, it has to be a thing. It can't just be something they made up. It has to be real. So these things are real, but they really, really blow up the significance so they can get you to do what they want you to do. Whether that's fight amongst yourselves, take some kind of action, vote, whatever. So the one I think they really got over on the left in the 2010s was police brutality. They made people in the U.S. think it was just absolutely out of control, even though the overall numbers didn't justify that, but they didn't show you those numbers. They just took isolated incidences and zoomed in on them as close as they possibly could, and it worked like an absolute charm. Oddly enough, even though in the United States police brutality incidents are slightly up, you just don't hear about them anymore. Because they set out to achieve whatever it was they achieved to set out back in the late 2010s, and it worked, and they moved on. Funny how nobody cares anymore, though, huh? To where I think on the right, the better example is going on right now. And this is very United States specific. I don't like really talking about what's going on domestically in other countries. I don't think that's really my place. I can reference it, but this is something I've already talked about on the podcast. And that is a very sensitive topic all over the world right now. But like I said, I'm just talking about the United States. And that topic is immigration. Now, we spoke in the population decline episode. I think it was episode 137. If you want to go look at it, it's one of my most listened to episodes across all platforms. I said, look, man, as much as you might not like it, based on what's going on right now, it's absolutely necessary. And if you figure out how to handle it the right way, it can be beneficial in the long term, even though short term there's going to be a transition process. Now, the United States, I think, has done a really good job of this compared to most countries for a number of reasons. I don't want to get into them because I'm already teetering on topics which are going to put me on all the wrong radars. But with Mexican immigration, it worked really well, all told, looking back on it. And I'm positive that long-term, this wave we're seeing now will as well, with mostly people from Central America coming in. Yeah, I mean, some others are coming across the border too, but it's not a lot. But there's a lot of Twitter accounts out there that are trying to make people think that it's a real problem because, of course, you get millions of people coming over the border and you do no background checks on them. Some of them are going to be criminals and they're going to do criminal things. And so every time one of these happens, these media outlets, in particular on Twitter, I've seen it on YouTube as well, they really, really focus in on it. When what you should be doing is looking at the percentages, just like we say in trading. If you take all the immigrants who have come over recently and you take the amount of crime and you do the math, what is that percentage like? Is that percentage higher or lower than your average American? And unless it's like crazy out of control high, then I think long term we're going to be okay. Maybe I'm just being overly positive. I don't know, but I feel like history is on our side here too. But man, some of these outlets are really trying to get you worked up over it. And so the way they do that is by employing the same tactic they used on the left 5-6 years ago. And it's up to you if you want to fall for it or not. So whether you agree or disagree with anything I just said, again, it's irrelevant. It's one person's opinion. What I want you to focus on is the tactic itself and be very mindful of it going forward. And I'm saying this as somebody who has biases and passions of his own. But because of this here podcast that I run, I cannot afford to have those passions and biases get in the way of the actual truth, wherever that truth may lie. I have to try to find the closest thing I can to the right answer, wherever on the spectrum that right answer might lie. Whether it's all the way to the left or all the way to the right, as usual, it's almost always somewhere closer to the middle. But the solutions here for episode 159 are twofold. One, try to recognize the zoom in tactic every time you think it's happening. And I'm going to tell you, once you see it, you can't unsee it, and you'll find that it is everywhere. They show you the parts of the news they want you to see, and then they obscure the parts that they don't. You may have already been well aware of this, but either way, hopefully now everybody is aware of it. The other piece of it is, I got this from Andrew Tate. He said something really interesting here. And, he's a chess player. And he sees life as one big chessboard. And if you think about it, life really is a game. Some people are just better at playing it than others are. And he says, too, in life, it's player versus player. You are playing on the exact same chessboard as the person across from you. The rules are exactly the same. And even if that person is better than you, they had a head start in life, they had better teachers, better resources, the rules are still the same, and those are the rules you must abide by. You can't play by different rules, you can't change them, and you can't complain them away. You certainly can't get emotional about those rules either. And you can't get emotional about how well or how poorly the game's going, because that's a killer too. You have to move those emotions away. You have to pull them back so you can see the entire board. It's like in trading. You have to trade the market that's in front of you, and that's it. In chess, you have to play the game that's in front of you, no matter what it looks like. You have to recognize where everything is, and you have to make the correct move. And that's really hard to do when you're busy yelling and screaming about police brutality or illegal immigration. It's really hard. And I'm not saying you can't be passionate and care about current events. You just cannot let it bleed over into your finances and your financial preparation. But I will say the more passionate you are, the harder transition this is going to be, and the harder it's going to be for you to keep these things away. And let me tell you something. Fear is a great motivator. As far as persuasion goes, it's number one. If I were to be, a financial podcast, but more of a right-wing podcast too, and I were to play up that fear angle, I would have 10 times the viewers I have right now. But you know what? To me, it's not helpful. And if you guys know my history and know my YouTube channel, this wouldn't be the first time I have cannibalized my viewership and my money for the sake of making a product that I want to make. But my point is on fear is when you really get to that point to where you feel like you're fully prepared and you're bulletproof, and no matter what happens, it's not going to affect you heavily, you naturally start to care about these things a lot less because they just simply don't affect you. And let's be honest, we've talked about before, most of these things going on in the world are only going to really affect the poor, like they always do, and probably the middle class. I mean, there's things out there that rich people get screwed by too, but they're usually able to absorb it and move on, to where it can often ruin your average citizen because your average citizen is unprepared. So I'll tell you what I'm doing this election season. I'm not really going to be paying much attention to it at all. I'm really going to be looking at the black and white of it. I mean, I'm prepared for either outcome. What happens during the election process may compel me to make certain moves, probably won't, but it would be good to get ahead of certain things. And we're going to have at least one episode, once we find out who's actually running in the United States for sure, talking about these if-then scenarios. But for the most part, I'm good. I'm just going to kind of sit back and chill and let everybody else go crazy. If I want to fight for something, if I want to make a change, I don't need to do that myself. I have all these other people out there doing my bidding, as do you. So let them. At the end of the day, it's probably more their problem than it is yours. We're back here chilling. We're just sitting back here waiting for the pieces on the game board to change a little bit. And whichever way it changes, we'll be ready. And then maybe in the meantime, take that passion and perhaps redirect it into some more constructive things. And let the rest of the world flip out over all this other shit. Because we're not crazy. They're crazy. We're just early.